Hello, and welcome to Enhanced Information Solutions webinar on eDatasheet and Pi Event Frame Manager. I'm Jack Audie, EIS's Director of Sales, and your host for this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all registrants. Here's the agenda we're going to have for today. First, we will have a poll followed by an introduction of EIS and today's speakers. We will then describe eDatasheet and Pi Event Frame Manager, followed by a demo and questions. So before we get started, here are some Zoom basics. If you notice in the Zoom control panel, you'll see the Q&A. You can click on that and you can post a question at any time. We will make certain that these questions will be addressed before the end of the session, either during the session or at the very end. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be presented with a survey. Please complete the survey so we can properly gauge the value of this webinar and your opinions. Okay, today's speakers. Bryce, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Bryce Lawrence. I lead our operational intelligence group here at EIS. So that's a group that is heavily involved in the design and testing and implementation of any of the EIS products, as well as additional services that we provide, centered around digital transformation and OT cybersecurity.
Okay. And me, as I said before, I'm Jack Audie, I'm the Director of Sales. I have over 23 years at OSIsoft, and had a lot of different roles. I worked with many of you all on this call. As you know, a lot of you have had pains and suffering associated with manually entering data into Pi, as well as managing your event frames without having to be a Pi system admin. So we've created these products, so we're going to present them to you today. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to start a quick poll, and I'd appreciate if you'd all take this, and we'll share the results. Okay, I'm going to share the results. So we currently enter manual data and or event frames to Pi via Pi Manual Logger, 4%, Excel with VBA, 20%, Process Book with VBA, 12%, something else, 28%, nothing else, 36%. All right. We are pleased with our current method for manually entering Pi data. Strongly agree, 4%. Mostly agree, 16%. Neutral is 44%. Disagree is 20%. Strongly disagree is 16%. Our current Pi visualization, Pi Process Book, 24%. Pi Vision, 72%. Something else, 4%. Okay. Thank you for that. So who is Enhanced Information Solutions? Well, we were founded 29 years ago in Stillwater, Minnesota, and providing primarily MES consulting and implementation services, Pi services, Seek, and OT cybersecurity. We also have three products, eDatasheet for manually entering data into Pi, Ops Tracker product is electronic logbook with workflow and complete audit trail, and Pi Event Frame Manager. It allows you to edit and create event frames. We are a global company. We have offices. In the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, Dublin, Ireland, Mannheim, Germany, Istanbul, Turkey, and Pune, India. And we have our individuals located globally throughout. These are where the offices are. Bryce, can you talk to EIS's Pi services?
Sure. So in addition to assisting with products, and we also provide services centered around, as I mentioned before, digital transformation, with a lot of them having to do with the PI system. We pride ourselves in being able to provide services from instrumentation all the way up to ERP and connecting all the points in between. We really look at this as two pieces that we provide, which is around the infrastructure, which is, making communications work, getting software installed, upgrades, etc., and then also around the application piece, which gets more into PI-AF and PI-Vision. And we concentrate on the application using people within EIS who really came from end users and have that process knowledge, so they're able to apply that to the AF to help with actually getting to what key metrics might be on a process. And then another piece of that infrastructure, of course, is in order to implement anything, you want to make sure you have good network communication and that you're doing it securely. So we do have people who are dedicated to focusing on industrial networking and then cybersecurity within the OT domain.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about eDatasheet. eDatasheet is manual entry data into PI. The idea behind here is a simple, easy to use, intuitive user interface. As you can see here from the polls, most of you are doing this already, or trying to do this already, or are doing it and want to move on. But the idea here is that there is no real training required. The idea here is that it should be very familiar to the end users, and it should not require training to be able to use. For Event Frame Manager, the idea here is to manually create and edit PI event frames. So it does continuously sync to PI-AF and event frames, and it allows you to create these event frames with some governance, with naming conventions, enforced batch ID uniqueness, and we also provide a complete audit trail. Bryce, can you talk to the architecture, please?
Sure. So the way it's set up is the Ops Tracker server. That is the server that houses all the Ops Tracker suite of applications, two of which we're talking about today, which are eDatasheet and so that server uses SQL Server on its back end for both storing data that's entered and also for storing the configuration of the forms and the workflows. The storage of the data is so that we can buffer as we talk out to the PI Web API. So all the security is handled through that. All the data passed in, read back out is through the PI Web API. And then users are using HTML5 compliant web browsers to talk to the Ops Tracker server itself with no direct connection to PI, with the idea of by setting it up this way, it allows you to distribute it however you want. If you want it all, on a single network in the plant, or if you want to distribute it across multiple networks in the plant, or even distribute it so you have people able to enter data outside the plant.
Bryce, we do have a question here about how do we deal with high availability collectives?
Sure. That's a great question. Another reason why we use the PI Web API is the Web API itself is built to handle collectives for the data archives. So it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 20 in your cluster of high availability collectors. We simply write out or read from the Web API, and then it handles that distribution automatically.
Okay, thanks. Next, we're going to do a demo, and Bryce, I'm going to make you the host here.
Okay. All right, you able to see my screen, Jack?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the Ops Tracker front end for both eDatasheet and Frame Manager is just HTML5, so any compliant browser will work for that. So there's a front end for both configuration and for clients, and so nothing to install. And then you can tie the users to Active Directory if you wish. You can have local users that are the username password stored within Ops Tracker, or you can do a combination of both, however you wish. So in this case, I'm just going to log in as a local user. And then we allow the ability to have multiple plants, because this is designed to be an enterprise solution. Obviously, if you're doing a single plant, you only have to have one. But the advantage is if you're doing a global rollout, it does allow you to have multiple plants, and then within the plants, you can set what the default languages are. For this, we're going to stick with English because that's what I know. And then once you've selected the plant, then you see what modules from the Ops Tracker suite that you have licensed. So in this case, we're going to pick eDatasheet. And then this gets you to where the form is. So the idea, as Jack mentioned, is to make simple, easy forms, easy to use, doesn't take training. And then the way we divide this up is there is a level which we call equipment. Now this is class-based, so you can actually have equipment classes like I'm going to show here with the columns. And then also you can use these equipment classes or the equipment level to be, it could be a department, it could be a building, it can be whatever you want. So there's no enforced hierarchy, there's just the ability to use this for organization and then for security as well. So that way, if a user doesn't have access to specific equipment class, then they won't see it in their list. So that way you can manage what each user sees, and everybody doesn't have to see everything. And then even within the equipment, you can manage the form security itself as well. So in this case, I've only got one form. I'm going to call it up. This is for the column class, but the column instance is the 4820. So once I call it up, I've got some ability to make the screen so it's a little more user-friendly for exactly what I'm doing. So we're going to say, well, for today, I really just want to see one day at a time, and I'd like to make sure I'm looking at today. So now I can see anything that's backlit gray and has numbers in it, in this case, then I know that has been saved out to Pi. In this case, we're not actually going to allow you to change that. So if I double click on this and I can try to type all I want, simply can't make a change. So once these values are written to Pi, it's saved. Now, as I go through all these options are at the form level. So that way you can have different forms with different ways to display, different security, etc., how you want it set up. A couple of things like that always exist. So as you can see here, there's a comment and then the ability just to enter data. I'll go back to the comment. So if I do enter data here, I can, as I would in a spreadsheet, I can enter it in, I can tab over. And then if I type it in and it's out of range, so in this case, I forgot the 0, excuse me, it'll pop up and show me, I can see the green for in range, I can see the red for out of range. And then the ranges are configurable for the specific values that you're entering. So each one can have its own range. It can have high and low, it can have high or low, or it can have none whatsoever. And then how we handle these ranges is also configurable on a form level. So in this case, when I try to save this, it's going to tell me you can't save a value out of range here, right? So if I go ahead and say save, it'll tell me, nope, that's not within 0 and 1. Not going to allow you to save that no matter what. We can also have it so it'll allow you to save it, but you have to enter a comment. Or we can have it so you can just save it. It doesn't care if it's out of range. It'll always still display red if it is. So in this case, then once I hit the save, then it goes ahead and sends the values out. As I mentioned, this shows me here that there is a comment. So comments can be edited and added at any time. They're just strings that you can enter in. You can have multiple lines. You can put multiple text. People can come in and do it. Anytime anybody saves anything, it gets recorded. So there is an audit trail on this. So it keeps track of the user who was logged in and the timestamp at which they made any change, whether it's entering a comment, thing like that. And then both with the comments and the data, comments and data can be configured to send out to separate PI tags. Now we can send to a PI tag directly by referencing the tag name, or we can send the PI tag through an AF attribute. Either way, you can mix and match. But you also can set this up so you don't have to send everything to a PI tag. So for example, on this, if I say, well, I don't really want to have all these comments stored in PI, just want them in eDatasheet, that's perfectly okay. You simply don't point the comment to a PI tag, and then it still gets saved, and you can still, in the SQL database, and you can still see it as you move through eDatasheet. And as I mentioned before, this is class-based. So the advantage of doing class-based is I can switch to another piece of equipment in that same class, and then it'll simply pull up the same form, leaves everything the same. I don't have to go reformat anything. So if I got a bunch of these and I'm cycling through them and I want to enter data, I can enter data. I can quickly then go to the next one, and I'm on the same day, everything, and I can. A couple other things you'll see on this one is the way it's arranged. We do have the tags on the top row, and then the timestamps going vertically. I'll show a reverse of that later. And also you may notice that these have perfectly even timestamps. And in this case, this is set up for sampling. So I've defined for this form, I want to sample every 4 hours, and I'm going to save that timestamp into PI exactly at 4 hours. You can make it so it does just this, but still allow people to edit the timestamps. In this case, I'm not allowing that. And then you can also do ad hoc. So if I switch over from where I'm doing more sampling versus where I say I'm going to do manual addition, well, for manual additions, I'm going to say, well, that's not really scheduled because I don't know exactly when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen. So this way I can have a nice ad hoc form here with the idea that I can add a new row. And once I do, it'll default to the timestamp right now. Now, these timestamps are always displayed in the local users, whatever the device is, whether it's a desktop or a tablet, whatever it's set up to be, it'll display in that, even though it'll obviously save everything in UTC. So if I do want to change this and say, well, actually, I did this earlier. This was earlier at 12:45. I can come through, I can make that change, and now everything I enter in this row will be saved into PI with that timestamp, that exact timestamp. And you can see on this one, it has an outer range value, and I was able to save it, so it must be allowing that. So to show that, the way this one is set up is if I enter it and then I go save, it's going to say, well, you got to enter a comment. I'll take that out of range, but you got to come in here and enter a comment. So now once I enter a comment and save it, then it'll go ahead and write that value out to PI because that's how it's set up. And as I mentioned before, you can definitely set it up so it does not require any comment, and it simply takes values that are range. And of course, then you can have values that don't even have ranges. The other thing you can see here is there are different data types. So you can have, string data types. You can have, this is a Boolean data type, time date stamp. So essentially it's any data type that PI allows that isn't an array. or some sort of list. So it's any of the basic data types, it'll take that. You can enter values, you can then save them out, and you don't have to enter everything at once. So another user can come in, log in somewhere else and they can enter data. It doesn't require that everything is entered at the exact same time or by the same user. But as I mentioned, it absolutely tracks who enters what data and when. So one other one here I'm going to show on this is just some more on data. So there is the ability to enter data that's drop downs. So in this case, I had entered a high value here, and then if I come and say, well, geez, why was that high? And then operator could come in and say, well, yeah, there's excessive vibration. So I'm going to enter that and save that out to go with it. So you can have drop downs here, and then the drop down can save out as either an enumeration number. So if you wanted it as a numbered list and you really wanted to save the number in Pi, or we can save it out as text. So it's simply up to you on how you configure it. So one other thing with...
Hey, Bryce, before we get to that,
Yep.
there are two
Sure.
questions. One is single sign-on available?
Yes, it is. So you can definitely link it up to your Windows Active Directory. So if you are already logged in the computer, you can have it. So you call up the URL and it knows who you are and it takes that as your credentials.
Okay, another question. You started to mention it, but there's a question about an audit trail.
There is, and I promise I'll go to that next.
Got it. And I wanted to add one other thing here. Is there a way to provide a URL to the data to eDatasheet bypassing the initial screen selection?
So this current release does not have that. That's something we're intending to put in the next release to allow you to go straight to a form based on the URL. We'll see that on the Event Frame Manager. We don't have it in the release here, but we do have a major release that's going to be coming out for eDatasheet in the summer. And one of the big other pieces of that, which I did not mention on the architecture, is the next release will allow disconnected. So currently this eDatasheet does require you to be connected to the server in order to save the data. But then the next release will allow disconnected, so you can sync up, walk around with a form, say on a tablet where you've got no wireless, and then when you come back in and connect to the wireless, it'll sync the data back up for you.
Okay. Oh, and here's one other question here. Can you pull data? Can you pull in data from Pi onto that form?
So the way the eDatasheet works is because it has a SQL database, we don't actually pull the data in, we push the data into eDatasheet. So we have a live example of this. American Styrenics, who presented at AVEVA World, actually is doing that right now with their system, where they're pulling data from Pi and actually pushing it out using the Pi RDBMS interface, and it actually creates the row in eDatasheet with some values filled out. So you'll see some of them like this that are grayed out and have values in them, and then some values are empty. So in their case, they're having the operator enter reason codes for off-quality products. So that puts in how much off-quality there was, but then the operator has to actually go in and tell them, why was it off quality? So they're picking from drop-down lists for that. So yes, we can definitely push it in. In that case, like I said, we did from Pi, but because it's a SQL backend, we really can push it in from anything. It's just a matter of setting that up, and there's a ton of tools out there outside of Pi, right? If you want to say push from SQL to SQL, etc., Oracle SQL.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So purpose of showing this, obviously, is that eDatasheet can be used on a vision display. So if you do need to have process data, or if you want to see trends, you want to have other things, you want to see if events are here as well. So this way you can put it right on a vision display. This is simply using URL custom. It's a custom symbol, but you can pull it off GitHub for OSI from Pi. It's not something we specifically developed, very easy to get free. All it does literally is point to any URL, and then it'll display it here. So then in this case, I got it pointed to the eDatasheet, and I'm actually going to do one. So if I enter something out of here, it is out of range. It's going to let me save it. So in this case, I've got it hooked up. Then we'll see it pop up here that the temperature dropped up. And there we go. It creates an event because it's a high temperature. So obviously you can tie that in using AF as you normally would. And then, you know, I can make the event clear by entering new values down here, saving this out, and then that'll clear out the event. I'll show that in a sec. And then the other thing is, in this case, we are allowing data to be changed. So I'll do this just so that make the. So if I come back here and hit 85 and then save it back out, it will absolutely change the value. And just to show, so I get my refresh here. Eventually it'll catch up on the bring back. Well, that's while we're waiting on that. I will pull up where the audit log is. Now, and just to show, as I mentioned, so this one's writing out the AF attributes. So if I refresh this, it's going to have, you know, what is the last timestamp I put in, which was the 10 a.m. And then just to show, so we've got it set up so the audit trail data obviously stored out, but we've just got SQL reporting services reports set up. Comes with the product. You can certainly make changes to them if you want to, but it gives you the base level. So in this case, if I want to look, pull through. So now you can see here where I just made that change. And when I changed it from 90 to 85, so it shows you where the update was, shows me the timestamp I put it in. And then over here is the timestamp in which it's saved in Pi. So obviously you'll see if you make multiple change, if somebody does go in and changes, you can see where it's the value's being written out, but you can see what it does. We also do have this audit trail for any changes to the form configuration, the equipment class or equipment configuration as well. So everything that gets changed is tracked in here. To be clear, the current, there it finally showed up, the current release of eDatasheet is not fully 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, so it does not have approvals and signatures, but the next release will. And you got any other specific eDatasheet questions? Otherwise, I'll jump over to the Event Frame Manager.
No, not currently.
Okay, so Event Frame Manager, which I'll show you, is fully already 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. So the idea of the Event Frame Manager is we just saw we can enter data, you know, discrete points of data into Pi manually, but how do you handle if I need to start an event, set an event frame, and I don't want to just hit a trigger to start it right now, but I actually want to enter an event frame with a start time, could have been days ago, right? And I want to end it. So I want to be able to set those times. I want to be able to edit values that are event frame attributes or potentially even values that are element attributes. So how do I do that? So that's what Event Frame Manager is for. So we're going to look specifically at entering some element attributes here and event frame attributes with the idea that, say, this is a portable tank, it's got instrumentation on it, but none of this is hooked up to Pi, and I'm going to run some batches on it. How do I catch that? So what we've got on here is a URL. So this is what I was mentioning before. So this actually does allow me to do filtering. So I'm going to tell it that I want to start a new event frame. I'm going to give it the event frame template that I want to start it with, and I'm going to give it the element that I want to attach to it. So what this will do then is this actually synchronizes with Pi. So as we go through this, think of anything I've got defined for event frame attributes and element attributes. This will go ahead and catch them and synchronize with it. So the idea is we want you to just do your configuration in Pi as you normally would and not have to do any extra configuration here in order to manage event frames. So the first thing it'll do is ask me for an event frame name. Now, optionally, you can put a mask on this name. So in this case, we're actually going to force it to be a B, then a dash, and then 3 letters, and then a dash and 4 numbers. So if I try to do outside of that, come down here, it'll say, nope, that's not correct. You got to stay in my mask. So if I do then it'll grab it. Now, another option on this is we can set this up, or you can set this up so that if you don't want to allow the user to reuse an event frame name as well, you can set it up to do that. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I had that set up here. So that way, if you want to make sure you have unique event frame names, you can set that up as well. So the description, then I can change this to be whatever I want. It just defaults to what the event frame name is. And then the start time I can set. Like I said, the whole key of this is that I'm able to set my start time exactly, because I may not start this exactly when I actually did it. So if I said, well, actually I did this at 1:15 and I want to have it be exactly 1:15. So I can set that, and then you can set the end time as well here, but I'm not going to do that so we can show the end event frame. So if I don't set it, it'll just leave it open. I'll go ahead, hit save, and as I mentioned, this is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. Now, that means you have the ability to put signatures on here. You do not have to have any signatures at all. Completely up to how you want it configured. In this case, I'm going to take a single signature just to show that. And then my other ones, I'm going to have a signature and a verifier. So I mentioned that the event frame attributes I can enter data into, and the element attributes I can enter data into. And I also said that, well, this is synchronizing. So a natural good question might be, well, okay, but how does it synchronize? So what it's actually doing is it's looking at, so our event frame has not been created yet on purpose, so I'll show you that. But what it's actually doing is actually looking at the attributes from the event frame template. So the attribute in the event frame template has to have this property set to manual data entry, which is just a standard property in Pi. AF, and it has to have none set for the data reference, because an event frame attribute, you cannot write to that attribute externally if it's tied to a Pi tag. Now that is different from the element. So an element attribute, again, will have manual data entry properties set. That's what we're looking for. But it could be a static attribute like this, or it can be an attribute that's hooked out to a Pi point. Now, obviously, you're going to have your Pi point configured to allow data to be written into it. But assuming that that is set up correctly, then I can have attributes that I write to. So the only thing it's looking for this attribute really is that manual data entry just set. So then you've identified, I want you to enter that, as opposed to like I've got a latitude and a longitude with the idea that these have sensor data and they're not set to have a property of manual data entry. So with that said, I can go in and I can enter the event frame data. Now, as I mentioned, this does automatic synchronization, but there is one thing that we allow you to configure here as well. So you can determine, do I want event frame attributes or element attributes to be entered at the start of the event frame, or do I want those values to be entered at the end of the event frame? So you may split up some of those attributes, which is exactly what I'm doing here as part of this demo, with the idea that some of the values you may not even know until you get to the end, and that way you can enter them at the end when you're done. It does allow you to do an enumeration. So an enumeration, again, is synced with Pi. So if I do change what the enumeration is, the new list will pop up the next time I run it. And as I mentioned, in this case, I'm going to hit save, and it is going to have me enter a signature and then have another person verify it. I'm going to move a little faster than I would anticipate this would be for real, but for the demo. So now it's pulling those element attributes. One thing you may notice on here, it's not pulling this weight because I've identified the weight as something I don't want to enter until I'm done. It also takes whatever the last value was that was entered. So if I come back here, I can see 74.5 and 88.5, and that's what it's pulling in. That's an option you can do. So if you want to have it pull that last value, in case it's something that it has potential, it doesn't change, so you can give them what that is. And then obviously there's the ability to go in and make the change. But again, these being enumeration sets that I can change. If I change it at the element attribute level, it'll automatically get synced up in here. Oops, I'm sorry. Hit F1 instead of 1. And then once I enter these values, I hit the save. It's again you saw the little 2, so that's telling me I'm gonna need 2 signatures for I'm gonna let you save this. And as I mentioned before, you definitely do not have to use signatures if you do not want to. So you can simply have them hit save and they'll move on. And then the idea here is once I enter the data, now it's going to give me these values for me to look at, because I can actually go back to the steps, assuming I've set up the security to allow this, and I can change the values. So this way, if I look and see something wrong, I can go back, I can rerun the step, I can resave the values. So at this point, it has not written anything out to Pi. We did this intentionally with the idea that typically an operator may be given the ability to start an event frame and to end an event frame, but you may want editing an event frame that's already been closed out to be at a higher security level, right? Maybe that's a shift supervisor, maybe that's a process engineer, whatever. So that's really the way we did it, is to give that. We just want to make sure we gave some feedback to the operator so that they could see it before they save it. And then once it's saved out, again, this is taking the 2 signatures. So now when I do that, it's going to create an event frame and it's going to update those attribute values, right? So the element attribute. So if we come back here, we should see the new values, right? So the humidity went up, temperature went up, and pressure went down. And our little graph shows as well. So there's other things that we can do with this right now. The next one we'll do, just for simplicity, is we'll do the end batch. So if I come in here and I hit end, so what this is going to do is I'm not passing in an element or a template at all, but it's going to limit this list to event frames that are open already. So you can see there's this one here that we just did. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and it'll fill that out just to show then. Go over actually at the AF. Right, and I refresh that. There's our event frame. It has not been ended. So that's what it's pulling in here. So now it's going to ask me to enter a time. Now it will make sense of the time. it'll say, no, you have to enter a time that's after the start time. You can't enter a time in the future. And there's other options that you can have around this for allowing what can be changed when you end an event frame. So in this case, we're going to just say we entered it. Oops. See it, so I'm going to say it ran for about 30 minutes. And then again, you see the one, so it's going to ask for one signature. And now it's going to go out and read, okay, what are the event frame attributes that are marked to be entered at the end of the event frame, and then what are the element attributes that are marked to be entered at the end of the event frame. So if I jump back here real quick, right, if I look at this, we can see, you know, it took some values, but there isn't anything entered for the string. The integer is the default 0. So that's what you'll see here is what the defaults are. So now if I put something in here, and it does, you know, enforce it. So I'm trying to hit the decimal point. It doesn't allow me to do it. So I can save this out. So now it's going to ask me for the weight. So that was the, if you remember, I said on the element, the weight was the one thing I wasn't going to ask for in the beginning. So I marked that to be at the end with the idea this is a portable scale. Maybe the scale itself is different depending on our portable tank, depending on where I put the tank. So I'm going to go ahead and change those values. Go through these. And then again, it's going to give me the same thing. So now I've got the ability to view it and determine if I want to make any changes and go back some steps. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just move forward. So now it's going to send the values out to the event frame to close out the event frame. It's also going to update the attributes on the element in AF as well. So now you see it changed, tells me it's 847 pounds. You can see here that this is the 1:15 start time of the event, and then this is the 1:45 and 16 seconds end time of the event. So it'll write those values based on how you set that up. And then if I come back here, refresh this, and see it closed out my event. I'm not going to walk through all these. There is definitely some other abilities. So edit batch, I'll start that, but you can actually set it up to where if you want to have the user select the event frame, or you want to have them select the element, or not even use an element. So there's different ways just to set up the URL. In this case, I'll do an edit batch. And then I know one we got last time was if you edit a batch, does it have to be the batch that was generated manually? And the answer to that is no. Or sorry, edit event frame. So the edit event frame works for any event frame. Idea being, so if I come here and I'll just select the one we just did so we can see it. Idea being that you could come in, you could change the event frame name, you can change the description, you can change the start and end time for any event frame. The only filtering it does is what you decide to set up of how far back to go look. just with the idea that if you've tons of event frames and you don't want to have it pull every event frame you've ever created, you can say, well, only give me the last year, etc. Then the caveat obviously is you're only going to be able to edit event frame attributes or element attributes on an event frame if you've specified them for manual data entry, just like I showed before, regardless of how the event frame gets created. So yeah, the edit is truly an edit event frame, and it doesn't matter where the event frame comes from at all.
Bryce, we have a few questions here, by the way.
Yep, perfect. That was what I wanted to
say. First on is save Alessia's for later, for afterwards. Here, if we have a fault event frame that gets data automatically, but I want to edit a description manual, is it possible for this kind of event frame? I believe you just showed that using editing batches.
Correct. So yeah, this strictly grabs an event frame, and you can even change the times too, right? So if you something.
Okay.
And again, this is typically why users make this a different security level. So they may not have operators allowing them to edit event frames.
Got it. All right, and I think we already addressed that. Can we pull in data from Pi on the form? Yes, we already addressed that. Yes. What is the update frequency to send data to the Pi server? I would assume there's two answers to that. One is sending data to the Pi by hitting save.
Yeah, I mean, when we send it to the Pi server through a form, we send it immediately. So it updates. I mean, you saw kind of how quickly it updated there, right? So that's immediately being sent out through the API. And then how often it does synchronizations is, in this case, is something you can set up as a user. So, if you want it every 1 minute, every 15, every 1 day, it doesn't matter. You just set that up.
Okay. All right. Let's see. And then we have one here. All right. And then Alesh asks, when you end the event frame, I don't see that you executed the capture feature of the event frame. Do we use this, or do we use that feature or not? Now, realizing Alesh is in the belly of the beast and probably a specific web API call. So
I'm not sure what the what's that referring to?
I'm not familiar with that capture feature of the event. Alesh, if you're there. I'll tell you what, Alesh, if you send that to me, if you send me that, or give me a call afterwards, we can discuss that. Okay. And let's see. And then I believe that's it. Let's see. Yep. And those are the questions we have so far.
All right, so I'll turn it back over to you then.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Probably what would be the next steps. Many of you are actually going through this now, but we have a trial of eDatasheet and/or Event Frame Manager. And the way it works right now is we do it with a 60-day trial, and it's a paid-for engagement, where for the $6,000 for either eDatasheet or Event Frame Manager, or $9,000 for both, unlimited use of the product at a given site. We'll install it, we'll build the forms, we'll go through the training, we'll make sure that you're up and running and using it. Once we get it all set up, we start the clock. You have 60 days to evaluate it. If you decide you want to go forward with it, we'll apply that trial fee towards the license fees. Okay. And if you decide not to, then we just go our separate ways. But we sell this both as a perpetual and as a subscription model. Okay, we can host this on-prem or in the cloud. All right. Well, let me see if there's any more questions out here. I don't see any. So, all right. At the end of this, I would appreciate if you would please take the survey. If you have any questions, please reach out to me directly. All right. And just reach out to me, Jack at eisinc.com. If you would take that survey, I would appreciate it. All right. Thank you very much for your time. And what we will do is I will send you all the registrants a link to this recorded webinar. Thank you and have a nice day.
We did have one other question. Sorry about the
didn't see that.
how it's licensed. So it is licensed by connection to a Pi server. So single Pi server connection, and it's based on the size of the Pi server. If you want to have one eDatasheet connect to multiple Pi servers, then yeah, the official answer is yes, each one would be a licensed connection, but that's certainly something we can work out with you.
But if those servers are members of a collective, basically it's the same data, we treat that.
Well, if it's a collective, but if it's different sites.
But if they're separate, separate.
And then the other question was, do we provide the pricing as part of the trial? And we will definitely do that. We'll give you the pricing before the trial so you know exactly what it would cost, assuming you accept the trial.
Yeah, we size it based on tag server size. But if you're an enterprise customer, we can also do it based on tier level. So most enterprise customers have each site listed as like a small, medium, large, or extra large. And what we will do is we will follow that same tier structure. We don't want to obviously penalize you for having an enterprise agreement where you have a lot of tags, but you have a relatively small site. So we will follow the same enterprise model that you have. So
great.
See, are there any other questions here?
That was the last one, was about the enterprise model. So perfect.
What about those already on an enterprise agreement? Yep, there you go. That was the last one. Perfect. Okay, great. All right. Well, listen, thank you again very much. Please take the survey if you will, and we will provide you with a link to the recording. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out to me, Jack at eisinc.com, or just give me a call. Thank you very much.